Okay, so the acronym for this chapter is TRAP. So T is for three modes that we just spoke about. R is for race for prominence. A is actions in these modes, and P is pure life. Okay, so let's look at them. What are the three modes? We spoke about them. So in chapter 13, Krishna talks briefly about these three modes. In one of the verses, Krishna says the living entity in the material nature follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of nature. This is due to his association with the material nature. Thus, he meets with good and evil among the various species. So, there is a mention of the three modes of the material nature in chapter 13. And now, this is going to be, even more elaborated in chapter 14. So, Purusha Prakriti Stohi Bhungte Prakriti Jan Gunan. This was the verse in 13 chapter, 13.22. So what happens is, just like there is, let's say, a bulb. Okay, so there is, let's say, white light. What will happen if you cover the bulb with some uh, translucent green color paper? What
The
will happen?
light will
Color will change.
The light color will change. What will be the
Yes.
light color now?
No, no, we will see everything in green color.
Everything in green, right? So
Mm,
originally
yes.
also the light is white, but then since it's covered with green, you will see everything green. And if you cover it with red, you will see everything red. The light will be red. And if you cover it with blue, it will be blue. So what happens is the living entity is also originally pure. However, when it comes, it has a desire to enjoy. It comes to the material world and it's captured or covered by these three modes, which is the mode of goodness, or the mode of passion, or the mode of ignorance. And therefore his activities and then are then characterized by these three modes. So in a mode of goodness, person behaves differently. In the mode of passion, he behaves differently. In mode of ignorance, he is different. Like here you can see in this picture, whereas there is very clear difference you can make out in the three qualities. In a mode of goodness, you can see this person is very very happy. He's joyful, he's cheerful, and he's full of energy. So this is mode of goodness. These are the characteristics you will see always in the mode of goodness. He's knowledgeable, peaceful. Whereas someone who's in the mode of passion, you will see other qualities. Like you see this person, he's shouting. There is a boss in the company, and he's shouting at this employee. So what is happening here? Who do you think is unhappy here?
Both,
the boss is unhappy.
Boss
both.
is unhappy. Both. Yeah, that is how mode of passion is. Actually, both are unhappy. Why? Because the boss is angry, and he wants some work to be done, and he's bringing out all that anger on this employee. So the employee is also frustrated and unhappy because the boss is pressurizing him so much, and at the same time the boss is also unhappy. So that is the mode of passion, where you are actually not just yourself affected by it, your greed or your lust, but you are also affecting other people by it. So neither you're yourself happy nor the other people around you will be happy. That's the mode of passion.
But at times people will not work if you don't raise your voice or show
At
your
times,
anger.
people will not work if you didn't raise. Yeah. So of course, some certain things are needed for disciplining. But when we talk about the mode of passion, passion is not about disciplining. It's about going beyond your need into greed. So the mode of passion is characterized by greed.
Okay.
So how much we need in life is one thing, and how much we desire and we want is another thing. So a person in the mode of passion, he has unlimited desires. He will never be happy with one thing. So much he has, and then he wants so much more, and then so much more, and then so much more, and he will go on like that. So he's never satisfied in one sense. And to fulfill those desires, he'll be working very very hard. So all day he'll be working 10 hours, 12 hours, 14 hours, and he thinks that that is the success in life, to work very hard and then get something out of it, out of that work.
Okay.
So that is the mode of passion. So when that is prominent, or a living entity is influenced by the mode of passion, then there is unlimited desire, there is greed, there is lust, and therefore it leads to frustration. So this is more of that. Yes, you're right, sometimes you need to discipline people to get them to work, because someone may be in ignorance, and they may not, they'll be lazy. So we'll come to ignorance now. So what are the characteristics of a person in ignorance? Like you see this person, he's seeing that his business is going down. So you will see that uh, in ignorance, a person is lazy. He is depressed. He's lonely. He is unhappy, and all of those characteristics. He has suicidal thoughts and things like that. So that is the mode of ignorance. Okay, so these are, like, broadly we have spoken about the three modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance. So I hope you all will remember these three if you had not heard it before. Now these are the three modes of material nature, and this is how the living entity gets influenced by the three modes. Sometimes the mode of goodness is more prominent, sometimes the mode of passion is more prominent, and sometimes the mode of ignorance is more prominent. It's not that if, let's say, someone is born uh, and he is in the mode of goodness, and so therefore throughout the life he'll remain in the mode of goodness. It's not like that. What happens is there is a race, and we'll come to that also. Okay, so let's go a little ahead with this background understanding of the three modes. Oh, Krishna. So this PPT seems to have some issue. It keeps closing. Okay, what I'll do is I'll probably try not presenting it, just maybe taking the slides from here. Yeah, I'll just present my screen again. You're able to see, right? Even now?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So I'll not present because I think it's becoming very heavy. So we were just speaking about the three modes, and now Krishna glorifies pure knowledge. So in the first two verses, Krishna is speaking what is the highest knowledge. So he's saying Param Bhuya Pravakshyami Jnanam Jnananam Jnanam Uttamam. So what he's doing is, now Krishna is actually telling that this knowledge that he's going to describe in this chapter, which is chapter 14, how pure it is, how topmost it is, so how uttama it is, the topmost of knowledge, and that he's going to give, and the result of attaining that knowledge, that also he's describing. So what is the result going to be after you have attained this knowledge that he's going to describe in chapter 14? That is described in the second verse. So what does he say in the second verse? He says, by becoming fixed in this knowledge, one can attain transcendental nature like my own. Thus established, one is not born at the time of creation or disturbed at the time of dissolution. So, like he did in chapters 7, 9, and 10, he begins this chapter by talking about how important and great and confidential this knowledge is. And if someone is situated in this knowledge, then Krishna is saying that he will attain me. He will come back to the spiritual world, and he'll have the same nature as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which means he will eventually have Sachidananda body, like that. So the jiva's contact with matter. Now in the third verse, Krishna talks about how, this material world, how he impregnates this material world with the living entities. So this material world, we know, is, full of matter, right, which is dead in one sense. Well, just like, a father impregnates, you know uh, the woman, and the child is there within the womb. Similarly, this material world is like Prakriti. The nature is there. All material elements are there. But Krishna says that I am the seed giving father. I am the one who impregnates or puts the living entities in this material world. And then what Durga Devi does is she covers the living entities with the five elements or different species of life. And like that, the living entities are actually born. So that is what Krishna is saying in verses 3 and 4. So he says, Sarva yonishu kaunteya murtya sambhavantiya tasham brahma mahadyonir aham bija pradapita. I am that seed giving father. And he says, Sarva yonishu kaunteya. Yoni means species. So he's saying, of all the species, I am the seed giving father. Krishna is saying like that. Then in the next verse, so this is a video, but anyway, we are not doing it the presentation. So all the species of life actually, comes into being by Krishna being the seed giving father, and the material nature is like the mother, which is impregnated with these living entities, and therefore there are so many different species of life that are there. And we will talk, we'll there is a mention of why there are so many species of life in the next chapter. So as per the desire of the living entity, he gets a body accordingly. And probably we would have spoken about this in the previous sessions as well, that whatever we desire, that is what we get. Of course, we need to deserve it also. So if a living entity is desiring to sleep a lot, then he'll be given the body of a bear. So if a living entity wants to eat without any distinction, then maybe he'll be given the body of a lion, and so on. So whatever senses we have, the eyes, the nose, the different senses that we have, they are actually all coming or taking shape based on our past desires. So even the current body that we have is actually a result of our past desires. So we desired certain things, and therefore we are placed in a certain situation. And of course, as we said, that it's not just a desire, but we need to deserve that also. Like for example, a living entity, a man, he wants to buy a big house, he wants to buy a big bungalow, but then there is no money in his bank balance. So then can he afford it? Although the desire is there to want to buy a big bungalow, but there is no money with him, so he doesn't deserve it in one sense. So similarly, a living entity may desire, but if he has that pious credit, then he's also deserving candidate for achieving whatever he's desiring, like that. So based on the living entity's desire, he gets different species of life. And Krishna is saying that all these species of life are actually, I'm impregnating all the living entities in the material world. So I am the seed giving father of all the living entities and all the different species of life, like that. So we see there are so many species of life, depicted in this picture. So Krishna is saying, I am the seed giving father of all of them. Okay. Then he says, Sattva, Rajas, Tamo, Bhava, Tama iti. So he's saying material nature consists of the three modes: goodness, passion, ignorance. And when the living entity comes in contact with nature, he becomes conditioned by these modes. So what does conditioned mean? It means that actually the three modes of material nature, they influence the living entity. And that is what we discussed in the beginning. We saw some of the characteristics of the three modes. So how does the mode bind the pure jiva? So like we said, in the beginning, the light, it's pure, it's bright, it's white. But when it gets covered with some cellophane paper, something like a red material, then the light also becomes red. Similarly, what happens is when the living entity gets associated with a particular mode, let's say the mode of goodness, then what happens is whatever characteristics are there of the mode of goodness, you will see all of those present in this living entity. He is behaving like that. He shows the symptoms of the mode of goodness, and that is how he is bound. Similarly, if someone is associated with the mode of passion or rajagun, then you will see all the symptoms present in the living entity, and he's characterized by all those qualities. Similarly, with the mode of ignorance also. So, like for example, let's say a living entity is very much, afflicted or influenced by the mode of ignorance. So what will his activity be like? He'll be lazy, he'll take to intoxication, he'll take to smoking. So already the world outside is so much polluted, and then yet he'll take something to smoke and put the smoke inside his body also. So he's polluting the outside environment, is anyways polluted, and then he's polluting himself by taking into intoxication. And when that goes inside, whether it's liquor or smoking or some other things which are not very very good for the health, then his body, it's getting damaged, and then that will lead to further problems. So it'll lead to disease, and then when it leads to disease, then there is further problem. You might have to be admitted in the hospital and be treated by that, and then for that you need money. So there are so many problems like that, and then you might just suffer because of an ailing body. And then it just doesn't stop there. It then at the time of death, then even the Yamdutas will come and punish this living entity for having led such a life. So, which means if a person is getting associated with the mode of ignorance, his life will become like that. There will be certain characteristics that you'll observe in him, and you will see this all around you. This is not some theoretical knowledge. You can look at the people who are there around you, and you will see that there are certain people who are always characterized by these qualities. You will see there are certain people who are very, very lazy. They just don't want to do anything. You know, if they have to do some work in office, they will just find out ways of escaping it, or they just don't have that you know go getter attitude like someone in the mode of passion will have. He is very, very ambitious. He wants to control things. He wants to become the boss. That is a mode of passion. So the life becomes characterized by such qualities when the living entity is influenced by one of the three modes, and that is how he is bound. And therefore these three modes are also actually called as ropes, the ropes that bind a living entity to this material world. So why bind a living entity? Because he gets entrapped. He doesn't know where he's leading. Someone in the mode of ignorance, he doesn't know where his life is leading. But taking to intoxication, he feels that he's making himself very, very satisfied or happy, or he's finding an excuse to avert the problems. But actually, it's leading to more and more and more problems. So that is how he's bound. Then he has to suffer in this world. So we'll be talking towards the end of the chapter. Krishna will be talking about how we need to transcend these three modes. Before that, we'll talk about more in a little bit about the three modes and what are the characteristics of the people in the three modes. So in verses 6, 7, and 8, Krishna is describing certain characteristics of the mode of sattva gun, the mode of goodness, the mode of passion, and the mode of ignorance. So in verse 6, he says, Jnana Sangena Chanaga, Sukha Sangena Badnati, Jnana Sangena Chanaga. So there are two qualities Krishna is saying, Sukha and Jnana. So person who is in the mode of goodness, he is characteristic, his characteristics are that he has happiness. You can see that he's generally very happy in nature. And he has Jnana, which is he has knowledge. So he can see things as they are. He know what is right from wrong. He can make that distinction in life. He's not someone who is just blindly getting driven away by unlimited desires. Rather, he understands and he stops by and he tells himself, okay, this is going to be good for me, this is not going to be good for me. So he's that knowledge, he has that distinction capacity in him. Whereas someone who's in the mode of passion, what does Krishna say here? Trishna Sangha Samudbhavam and Karma Sangena Dehina. So Krishna is saying that someone who is in the mode of passion or the mode of Rajaguna, so there are certain other qualities, and he says there are unlimited desires, Rajo Ragatmika Buddhi. So the mode of passion is born of unlimited desires and longings, and because of this, someone is bound again to the material world. So that is the mode of passion. And in the mode of ignorance, what is there? So Nidra Alasya Pramad. So Mohanam Sarva Dehinam Pramad Alasya Nidra Bhis. So there are three things. So Nidra means sleep. He's always often oversleeping. And then there's Alasya, which means laziness. And then there is a certain kind of madness also. Someone who's influenced by the mode of ignorance. And then in verse 9, so Krishna is saying there is a summary given. So goodness conditions one to happiness, passion leads to fruitive action, and then ignorance leads to madness. Okay. So we've spoken a little bit about the three modes. Are there any questions at this point? Anything that you would like to ask?
It's always good to be in sattva gun, in goodness.
Okay. Yes, that's true. So it is always good to be in the mode of goodness. So we may be at any level, like we said before, and we'll be talking about that now also in the coming verses, that there will always be a tug of war, which means sometimes the mode of goodness becomes prominent, sometimes the mode of passion becomes prominent, and sometimes the mode of ignorance becomes prominent. But we have to try and rise to the mode of goodness so that we can see things in the right perspective. Unless we rise to the mode of goodness, we'll not be able to see things as they are. So although it may be written on the cigarette packet, this is injurious to your health. You cannot make sense of it. Just a crude example to
Right.
explain the
Understood.
point that uh, so when one rises to the mode of goodness, he can see literally how the things are working in this world. He gets that knowledge. He can distinguish between matter and spirit. He can distinguish what is happiness, real happiness, and what is temporary happiness. So that discrimination power will actually be there if someone is in the mode of goodness. The knowledge is there, the distinction is there. Okay, that general sense of happiness is there. So but then even that is binding. That is what we saw in the previous verse, which means someone is conditioned by that happiness, which means anything is, whether it's ignorance, whether it's passion, or it's goodness, it's going to bind you to this material world, which means you will have to come back to the material world to enjoy or suffer, depending on what you are actually influenced by. So one has to transcend these modes, which means go beyond even goodness, or something that is called as pure goodness, or Shuddha Sattva. So that we'll come to the end. We'll come when we go to the end of the chapter. We'll be discussing that how to transcend the modes of material nature. Any other questions?
So the more you are in the mode of goodness, the more you will tend to be in that mode, is it?
The more you are in the mode of goodness, the more you will tend to be.
In
So,
that
like we said, there will always be a tug of war. So, when you are in the mode of goodness, there will be a tug of war, which means sometimes the mode of passion will pull you towards it. So then you need to try and be there in the mode of goodness in one sense. So you'll have to use your intelligence. You have to associate with things, with people, with surroundings that are favorable for the mode of goodness. For example, it is said, city life is like mode of passion, and when you're living by the countryside and villages, that is the mode of goodness. And if, let's say, you go to some nightclub, that is mode of ignorance. So let's say you're in the mode of goodness, but then you happen to go to a nightclub. Some friend said, "Okay, let's come. We'll have some party." Immediately, what will happen is the mode of ignorance will become very, very prominent, and we'll be influenced by that. So there'll be a tug of war then. Okay, and that mode of goodness will go away. So the surrounding. I'm just giving an example. The surrounding now is actually influencing you. So in that sense, not just the surrounding, but everything, can be characterized in one sense in two modes. So even the food we eat, we'll see that in the later chapters. The food we eat also is characterized in the mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance. So there is sattvic ahar, we all know, we hear that, right? The food in the mode of goodness. So something that nourishes the body, like grains, wheat, cereals, milk. So this is in the mode of wholesome food, so more in the mode of goodness. Whereas Rajasic food is very spicy, uh, pungent sometimes, and then ignorance, the Tamoguni food will be something that's stale or meat and things like that. So there are different factors in our life that will actually influence these different modes upon us. So we'll learn more about what different things are there in these modes in, I think, the later chapters after chapter 16 and 17.
Okay.
Any other questions? So then there will have to be my the essence of the point was that there will have to be an effort for one to actually come to the mode of goodness, by taking into factor so many other things that that are put in these mode of different modes. It's food, it's around. Let's say you are sitting in your home, and if all of your surrounding where you're sitting is actually very unclean, very unorganized, then that is like ignorance. So that will affect you. The conscience will be affected. Whereas someone who's in the mode of goodness, you'll naturally see that he's always very clean, very organized, and he puts things in order. It is very natural for someone who's in the mode of goodness. So now in this verse, it's described here, "O sinless one, the mode of goodness is purer than the others," and it says, "is illuminating, and it frees one from all sinful reactions. Those situated in the mode of become conditioned by a sense of happiness." There are pictures of many great personalities given here. who could be said, to be probably in the mode of goodness. So you will see that there are poets, there are intellectuals, sometimes there are scientists. Their life is more like, that in the mode of goodness. But the problem is that they are conditioned by a sense of happiness, which means they are also stuck. Although they are in the mode of goodness, and they may be, they are the people who like to do the right things, they like to do good to others, they may be philosophers, but then yet they do not know the distinction between body and soul, and the soul and the super soul, and how to get out of the cycle of birth and death. So it's as if almost like, they are riding a car, and they are very careful to stop at every signal, and not break the laws. However, if you ask them where are you going, they have no idea. So there is no goal. So that is, someone who's in the mode of goodness. They like to do the right thing, but then the true ultimate goal of what life is, who am I, what is my relationship with the Supreme Lord, that is lacking. And because of the sense of happiness, they get conditioned by that, which means that they feel, yes, I know things, I have that knowledge, and they feel happy and content in what they understand and know. And therefore it conditions them and brings them and keeps them in this material world. So in mode of goodness actually binds one. However, for our practices, it's good to come to the mode of goodness and then rise beyond that. And we'll talk about that in the future slides. Okay. So then the mode of passion is born of unlimited desires and longings, O son of Kunti, and because of this, the living entity gets conditioned to material fruitive actions. So we said about this also. And there are different pictures you can see on the right, that describe or show mode of passion. Someone who's very lusty, he may become a dog in his next life. Someone who wants to expose, their body, they'll be born as trees because the trees are naked. There are no clothes. So according to our desires, we are actually creating our future body. So in therefore, in one sense, one has to be so careful, of the kind of life one is leading. Okay. And then, O son of Bharat, know that the mode of darkness born of ignorance is delusion of all embodied living entities. The results of this mode are madness, indolence, and sleep. Okay. So this we spoke about earlier. Okay. Second is race for prominence. Okay, we'll go a little fast now. So as we were saying, there is a tug of war. Sometimes the mode of goodness becomes prominent, sometimes passion, sometimes ignorance, right? So in this competition, one mode wins over the other based on the psychology of the person, and therefore we need to equip ourselves with the right knowledge and understanding of things. When we do that, then it'll help us to remain in the mode of goodness. So that effort will be there. Like for example, I remember when the first time I wanted to go to the temple. It was like decade ago, more than a decade ago, and I was introduced to certain programs there. So it was a custom, in every household on Sundays you get up late, or even if you get up early, the early is like 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, or something like that. But then I had the desire that I wanted to go and attend, the morning Mangal Aarti, or the morning Darshan Aarti. Mangal Aarti is at 4:30 in the morning, and then Darshan Aarti is 7. So I would go there, at 7 o'clock, let's say in the morning, and attend the Aarti. And then when I would come back home, I knew there was a program again in the afternoon at 1 o'clock. But when I would come back home, because I was not used to getting up early, there was a strong sense of, wanting to go back to sleep, and that would happen also because your body is just not used to it. Your body is just not used to getting up early in the morning. And then I knew that I had to attend the afternoon program as well. It was so important for me, I felt at that time. So then I wanted to go back to the temple, but it was such a strong conditioning that it was very, very difficult to adapt and make myself get out of the bed and actually go there. So you need to take that extra step and that endeavor to actually come out of that ignorance, which is there. So so there are certain things you'll have to push, and there are certain things that we can practice in our day-to-day life which will actually help us transcend these modes. So the tug of war will actually, it'll make things easier for us when we are in knowledge. So competition amongst the modes, this is what we are discussing. When goodness increasing, so there are certain characteristics again, described, Krishna says when goodness is experienced in all the gates of the body, the body is called the city of nine gates. They get illuminated, which means all the gates. Uh, the food that you eat is pure. The things that you are seeing with your eyes is something pure. It's not something nasty. Similar the ears, you're listening to nice kirtans of music, which will actually purify your consciousness in your heart. So similarly, all the senses of the body are actually illuminated, by knowledge. And in the mode of passion, he says that when the increase of mode of passion, there is great attachment, and there is fruitive activity, intense endeavor, and uncontrollable desire and hankering. So the desire is so strong that you just cannot control. Like you can see in the picture, this man is putting money, in his mouth, and you will see very often people like that, in society. They're just so mad after wanting to earn. That strong desire is there that this is life. To somehow amass a large amount of wealth and buy the comforts and luxuries, and that will be success in life. So someone who's in the mode of passion, he has that intense desire and longing. And then in the mode of ignorance, you know he says that there is darkness, inertia, madness, and illusion. So this is also something we discussed earlier. So there is complete illusion, and like they say sometimes, in ignorance is bliss. That is, someone who's in the mode of ignorance, he feels like that, to do everything that's not right, and he feels that this is the way of life. So he'll take to intoxication, or he's just crazy and mad, and does things which are completely unexpected. So that is mode of ignorance. Okay. So these are some of the things you can see. Mode of goodness: reading books, watering plants, listening to some traditional music, like that. So the next part is action in the modes. This is A. So trap, we did TR. Now in action in the modes. So what is the destination of the people in these three modes? That is being described here now. So someone who's in the mode of goodness, he attains the higher planets. He goes up. Someone who's in the mode of passion, he remains on this earthly domain. And someone who's in the mode of ignorance, he will be going down to the lower planets. So that is being described then by Krishna in the next few verses. Or he may even go down to the lower species of life. So we know that actually human life is like a junction. Junction means that there are many paths. You can go anywhere. If we are in the mode of goodness, then we will go to the higher planetary systems and enjoy a much more materially happy life. Someone who's in the mode of passion will remain here. Ignorance can actually lead you to hellish planets or even lower species. So we learned about the theory of evolution. We were discussing that a few classes ago also. Darwin's theory of evolution. Of course, the Vedic
Excuse me,
scriptures. Yes,
sir, can you name the lower planets, please?
there are many. Uh, Patal, Rasatal. So there are seven lower planetary systems, and
Okay,
there are seven higher planetary systems. We can probably share this in the group later. Okay.
okay,
There are
fine.
total 14 planetary systems, and we are in the middle. So which is the Bhuloka, the earthly planetary system. The Tal, Atal, Patal, Rasatal, like that. There are seven lower planetary systems.
Okay,
So
sir.
what was I talking about? Yeah. So the human form of life is like a junction, and
You were talking about Darwin's
sorry,
theory.
Darwin's theory of evolution. So, of course, the Vedic scriptures do not talk about evolution in the sense that man has come from a monkey or anything like that. That is just an idea that probably Darwin took from the scriptures, that there is an evolution of the soul. The soul moves from the lower species to the higher species, but it's never said that the human form has come from a monkey form, and that we do not even see today. Anyway, it's a theory, but we learned that. So, uh, but although the theory says like that, it doesn't talk about human devolution. There is evolution, but there is no devolution. But here it is said that there is human devolution also, which means that if a living entity is associating with the mode of ignorance, from human form of life he'll go down back to the lower species, because the soul will then take up lower species, because his association is with the mode of ignorance. And animals generally, of course, even the animals may be categorized into different modes, but generally speaking, they're not the consciousness level is much more lower in the animals. Yes, Umesh, you have
So
something.
somebody who's in lower species, say an animal, how will he be in the mode of goodness and rise up to the higher species?
So there is a natural evolution that is there, which means a living entity in lower species, he will gradually evolve to higher and higher and higher species till the time he reaches a human form of life. And then human form of life is like a junction. Now he can decide where he wants to go. He wants to go up, he remains here, or he goes down.
Okay.
So there is a natural evolution that takes place, which means the living entity may be in the plant species, then the animal species, gradually evolving until it reaches a human form. And then from human form, it's a junction. So he can go back to lower species again, depending on his activities.
Okay.
Okay.
Does
So,
evolution depend on the karma?
sorry,
Does evolution depend on the karma?
the natural evolution is there from lower species to higher species. Karma is there at the stage of human form. So karma is not there for animals.
Okay.
Because in human form of life, they choose what to do and what not to do. Whereas animals are mostly, they have a certain fixed way of lifestyle and what they eat and what they do.
So does it mean that after coming to human kingdom, it can devolute, go back due to his karmas to the plant kingdom or animal
Yes,
kingdom?
yes, certainly. That's what we said, na? Like we saw the example of, like you can see here in this picture, this person is eating without any distinction, any food which is not very good for human form. He may be eating meat or something like that. So then he may be demoted to a hog's life. A hog is someone who eats without any distinction. He eats stool, something very nasty. Similarly, here you see that man is trying to forcefully enjoy a woman. So he is full of lust, and therefore he may be demoted to the species of a dog, a lusty dog. So like that. So depending on our activity, we can actually go into the lower species. Because why it is like that is because whatever the desire of the living entity is, he gets a life accordingly. The super soul or the Paramatma, he knows the desire of the living entity, and he will fulfill that desire. So if one is very very lusty, or someone is very very sleepy, he wants to just sleep all day, then Krishna says, okay, you want to sleep all day, human form of life is not meant for that. So why don't you take the body of a polar bear and sleep for 6 months without any problem, no one will disturb. Because the human form of life is meant for a higher purpose. Athato Brahma Jigyasa, the Vedanta Sutra says, which means that now that you have got the human form of life, please inquire about the absolute truth. Inquire about who you are. Inquire about what this life is all about. Inquire about God. What is our relationship with God? So that is what the human form of life is actually primarily meant for. But keeping that aside, if we become animalistic in our activities, then we are bound to go back to the animal species.
Sir,
Yeah.
what is shown in the first one?
What is shown in the first one, it looks like it's a mode of goodness, where a living entity is, okay, I do not exactly understand the picture, but it's the mode of goodness, and he is going to the higher species or the higher planets in the heavenly kingdom.
Okay, sir.
Sir, I have a question. That in Kali Yuga, is it possible to live sattvic life fully?
Certainly it's possible. That is what we said, we'll have to mold our life in such a way that we can actually, fully means there will always be the mode of passion or ignorance trying to pull us down, but then we have to transcend even goodness, even sattvagun, we have to transcend and go beyond. So that we'll talk about in the last few verses of this chapter. It is certainly possible, otherwise there's no point discussing it here.
So I think in today's world, there is a mixture of all these three qualities present in the human beings.
Yes, certainly it's there. The mixture is there. But that doesn't mean that we cannot rise to the mode of goodness. It's possible, but then we have to have the right association, the right understanding, the right knowledge, the right activities. The way we lead our life has to be molded, in such a way that we actually come to the mode of goodness. So it's possible.
More control of over our sense organs.
Yeah, more control over our sense organs. Even further, we'll see in the chapter that when we engage our senses in devotional service to the Lord, or when we engage in bhakti, then Krishna says that actually you will transcend all the modes. You'll go beyond goodness, passion, ignorance, all of them. Like that. So we'll be coming to that. Okay, so this is result of action. So having described all the pervasive control of modes, Krishna will now describe how to transcend the modes and explain his own position in relation to them. So this is what we're coming to. This is the last section of the chapter, which is pure life, P. So TRAP is the acronym we were looking at, and P is pure life. So seeing the modes as doers and the Lord as transcendental. Okay. So this is verse number 19. I'll read the translation. So Krishna says here, when one properly sees that all in activities, no other performer is at work than the modes of nature, he knows Supreme Lord, who is transcendental to these modes, he attains my spiritual nature. So Krishna is saying, actually, people in this world think that, I am the doer. But actually what is happening is the three modes or the three gunas are actually making people work. You can see this picture on the left, like you see puppets sometimes. So they are being controlled. Similarly, the three modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance, are actually controlling the living entities in this world. But however, the living entity thinks that I am doing things, I am sleeping, it is my desire to do so, or I am the cause of all the success that I've actually achieved in life. I did all the hard work. But actually, he doesn't know that the mode of passion is actually making him work hard. So, in other words, the modes are actually making the living entities work. Right. So Krishna is saying, as one who's seeing like that, he understands that the Lord is there, who is beyond the three modes, and it's actually the three modes of nature that is making things work in this material world. He's seeing things as they are. He's in knowledge. And then he says in the next verse, when the embodied being is able to transcend these three modes, he can become free from birth, death, old age, and distress. So if one goes beyond the three modes, then he'll be free from birth, old age, disease, and death. And that is a real problem of life, not any other problem. So now we come to the last section where Arjuna is asking some questions. So he's asking, by what symptom is he known? What is his behavior? And what is the process of transcending the modes? So pure devotees, devotees who are there, their lives are, so the thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. That is what Krishna says. And then he says their lives are fully devoted to my service. So, okay, is my voice not clear?
Sir, it is
It is clear.
fast forwarding in between.
It's fast forwarding. Is it for everyone or is it for some of you all?
No, it is
No,
okay.
it's clear, loud and clear.
Loud and clear. Okay. In case there is any issue, do let me know.
Okay.
Okay. So, yeah. So someone who's engaged in devotional service, their lives are fully dedicated to my service. So that's what Krishna is saying. And so then they are, completely blissful. That is being depicted here in the picture. So such a living entity, who is engaged in devotional service, he will not be affected by the three modes, which means he transcends the three modes also. And that is some of the few verses we'll see. So he is very, very happy in engaging in service, whether it's offering food to the Lord or reading the Bhagavad Gita, hearing the Bhagavad Gita, conversing about him, about the Supreme Lord, about his teachings, about his activities. The living entity is very, very happy. So those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. Krishna says that. So if we engage in devotional service or bhakti, then Krishna is saying that I will give them the understanding how to come to me. So what are the symptoms? So of a person who is, free from the influence, those are described here in the last few verses. Doesn't hate illumination, attachment, and delusion when they are present for or long for them when they disappear. So this is verse 22. This is the internal mood, of a person who is free from the influence of the three modes. So he is not affected internally. And then verses 23 to 25 describe about his external conduct. Uh, so I'll not go into the detail for the shortage of time. And then finally, in the last verse, verse 26, pure bhakti is the process of transcending the three modes. Not the last verse, but the last few verses, the second last verse. That is what Krishna says. Mamcha avayobhi charina bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. So Krishna is saying one who engages in devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances. That means he's always engaged in bhakti. Such a person can transcend the three modes of material nature. That means he can go beyond goodness, passion, and ignorance. That means he will not be influenced by any of these three modes, which means you will not see those characteristics in him. If it's in the mode of passion, there will be no frustration, greed, lust, anger, and so on. If he's in the mode of ignorance, all those qualities. Someone who goes beyond those three modes, he'll not be affected. So the internal symptom that's described here in verse 22, is free from attachment, delusion, and all of that. So you can see on the picture in the left, that's Vidura. He is being asked to leave the palace by Duryodhan. He was greatly insulted by Duryodhan in the assembly, and therefore Vidura actually leaves the palace and he gives the bow also there at the gate. And but he's unaffected, and he goes then for a Tirth Yatra to different holy places, and learning and gaining knowledge from different sages. So person who is like that, he'll be unaffected, who's transcended the modes of material nature. There is a nice video. I hope the presentation, if I can play, I'll try. I hope it doesn't close. Okay, this is Srila Prabhupada in the final moments when he was just before he was leaving his body, and you can actually see from this video how he was actually beyond the modes. He was unaffected in any way, and there are all these qualities that are described here on the sides. You can see it. I'll just try. I hope the PPT plays right now. It just seems to be stuck. It's too heavy.
Sir, what was the name of that person?
That's Srila Prabhupada, who's the founder of ISKCON. Okay.
Sir.
Maybe some other time we'll show you the video because, the PPT just closed. All right. So that completes the chapter 14. We spoke about how eventually by engaging in devotional service, one can actually transcend the three modes of material nature. Any questions or comments so far? If not, we'll go to the next chapter then.
So normally the last verse, does it give a summarizing remark on the chapter?
So the last verse in this chapter, Krishna says that I am Brahmano hi pratishtaham. So he's saying that I am the basis of impersonal Brahman, which is immortal, imperishable, and eternal, and is the constitutional position of ultimate happiness. So in the last verse, Krishna is saying that, so there is, like we had spoken in the previous chapters about the Brahma Jyoti, or the impersonal form of the Lord. So Krishna is saying that I am the basis of that. So even that Brahma Jyoti is actually coming from me. So that is the last verse that is being described. There is a whole big explanation to that. It's not like a summary. So the chapter, if you see through how it was, the TRAP was the acronym. Anyone remembers what was TRAP? T is simple.
Transcendental.
No, not transcendental.
No,
Sir, can
sorry.
you repeat, please?
Three modes, right? This was the three modes, right? The chapter was about three modes.
Yeah.
What is R?
Race for prominence.
Race for prominence, which means the modes are always having a tug of war.
And A stands for actions in the modes, and P
Actions
stands for
in
pure
modes.
life.
And
Pure
only pure life, which is by engaging in devotional service, one can actually transcend the modes of material nature. So he'll be unaffected in any situation if one is practicing devotional service.
What is Brahma Jyoti?
Brahmajyoti is the impersonal, it's like impersonal form of the Lord, which is like an illumination or an effulgence that comes from the spiritual world. So the Supreme Lord Krishna, there is an effulgence coming from his body, and that effulgence is there between the spiritual world and the material world, and that is called the Brahma Jyoti. And the living entity, the impersonalists, they try and merge into the Brahma Jyoti. Merge meaning they try and situate themselves there in the Brahma Jyoti. So for them, liberation means to go and be there and then become, situate themselves and think themselves to be that I am Brahman. So Om
It's like
Shanti,
his.
Shanti, Shanti, like that. So that's it. So
So
that is,
is it like his aura?
yeah, aura, effulgence, like that.
Okay.
So the living entity, the impersonalists, they try to liberate themselves and go and situate themselves in the Brahma Jyoti. That is not the topmost thing. That is what we'll discuss now in the next chapter, Purushottam Yoga. That is how the next chapter begins also.
Okay.
What is this Brahma Jyoti, or what is beyond the Brahma Jyoti, what is this material world, what is the spiritual world? So that'll be the discussion now. So we'll start with the next chapter, chapter 15. This is again a short chapter. There are many videos. I hope this PPT works fine, which I'll be able to show you then. I think my computer is heavy with a lot of things. Okay, let's try running this. So I just share my screen. Yeah. So the acronym for this chapter, chapter 15, is HOME. Okay, HOME, and the first H stands for home or hotel. O is on and on, over and over again. M is maintainer of body, mind, and soul, and E is the essence in 3 verses. Okay, so the first is home, H, home or hotel. So the spiritual world, in this chapter, it describes how the material world. So there is a story I can tell you. Once there was a princess, and she was taking a bath in the river along with her friends. And then when she came out, then she just realized that she actually lost her necklace, and that necklace was very, very dear to her. So she went back to the kingdom and she told to the palace, and she told the king that I've lost this necklace. The king said, okay, no problem, I'll get you another one. She said, no, 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 this necklace was very, very dear to me because it was given to me by a friend. I want that very same necklace back. So then the king arranged, he called for his ministers and everyone. He said that go and hunt for this necklace. Wherever it is, it may be there in the kingdom, go and find it. And anyone who finds this necklace, will be awarded. So there will be a big reward given to this person who finds this necklace. So then the hunt began and everyone is looking for it. So one day there was one man, who was standing by this small pond of a lake, and he was just standing there all day long. There were so many people passing by, but he just stood there all day long. And then there was a sage that was passing by there also. So when the sage looked at this man, he said, what are you doing there? Why are you standing there? For such, I saw that you've been standing there for such a long time. Can I help you in any way? And the sage asked him. The man said, no, no, go away. He was afraid actually. He did not want to reveal, why he was standing there. So, but then he was perplexed. So the reason he was standing there was because the necklace he could see in the water body down, and but the problem was whenever he dived into the water body in trying to search for the necklace, he went down, but then he could not find it. So then he told the sage, he said that, see, I can tell you why I'm standing here, but I have a condition that you should not ask for your share. You can help me, but then don't ask for any fees for your help. So the sage said, yes, why not? So then he explained this problem. He said that, you see, you can see that there is a necklace down there. But whenever I go down, I try to locate it. I'm not able to find it. So can you help me in this? So the sage smiled and he said, yes, why not? So then the sage went up the tree. He climbed on a tree which was there nearby, and he went to the edge of the branch, and he brought the necklace down from there. So you understand what happened? So the necklace was actually on the tree. What was this man then seeing in the water?
Reflection.
Yeah, the reflection of the necklace.
Reflection maybe.
Yes. So this chapter begins with explaining how this world that we're living in, the material world, is actually like a reflection, a perverted reflection of the original spiritual world. Right? So you see there is a picture on the top right. That is the material world down there, where you can see Lord Brahma is there on the topmost planet. And then from there are, all the 14 planetary systems that are there coming down. And it's filled with, so many things. There are so many branches, there are so many leaves, twigs, and so on. So that is the material world, which is influenced by the three modes of material nature that we spoke about in the previous chapter. And you can see just above that there is a river kind of, where it says desire. The word desire is there. So when the living entity desires to enjoy independent of God, that is when he comes to the material world, attracted by the three modes of material nature, and he gets trapped by this three modes of material nature. On the top of that, you see there is a whole spiritual world there, with Radha and Krishna, and the different plants, animals, and trees. Everything is there in the spiritual world. So the material world is like a reflection of the spiritual world, where the real thing exists. The material world is characterized by dukhalayam. It's called dukhalayam, right? We've discussed that in the previous sessions, which means it's full of misery. Whereas the spiritual world is full of happiness, vaikuntha, which means without kuntha, without anxiety. There is no anxiety there. The material world is filled with, birth, old age, disease, and death. Everyone has to be born. He has to be disease. He'll be diseased at some time. He will go through old age, and he'll have to eventually die. Although none of these things are something that we want. Is there anyone who wants to become old? No one. Is there anyone who wants diseases? No one. Is there anyone who wants to die? No one. So you can think for a while, if these are things that we don't desire, we don't desire death, we don't desire old age, we don't desire disease, yet they are forced upon me, isn't that unnatural? By nature, the living entity, he doesn't want to die. And the reason for that is because he is eternal. The soul is eternal. But because we are entrapped in this material body and we so strongly identify with the material body, we feel afraid of death. But in the spiritual world, where the living entity, the spirit soul, is there in his original constitutional position, there is nothing like death. There is nothing like old age. There is an eternal life which is free from birth, old age, disease, and death. And there is eternal happiness. So that is our real home, unlike the hotel, where you would probably have to pay for everything, in a hotel. The waiter may come and smile and ask you, what is it that I can do for you, sir? But you know that the intention behind it all is actually some money, he's getting in return. So it's very fake. It's not the real thing. Whereas in the home, everything is real. There is, so when the animal is looking for water in the desert, there is no water. There is only the mirage, the reflection of the sun, and the animal chases it and he dies. But that doesn't mean that there is no water anywhere. The water may not be there in the desert, but the fact that he is looking for water, it means it exists somewhere. The fact that we're looking for eternal life means that it exists somewhere. The fact that we're looking for happiness eternally means that it exists somewhere. Right? So that is what this chapter begins with, with the description of how the material world is a perverted reflection of the spiritual world, where everything exists in its reality. Just to check on time. Okay, it's past 9. We'll try and complete this real quickly then. Okay. So we spoke of how this is a perverted reflection. I'll just go through a little fast because these are things we've already seen before. So suffering is there in the material world. So if you go to the Brahma Jyoti, there is peace. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. That is coming to the 0-0 platform. But there is a positive axis also, which is above that, which is the spiritual world where you can actually joyfully live. Peace, it's beyond peace in one sense. Right? So that is in the spiritual world. Okay, so sorry, I just went a little too fast. So Krishna then describes, he says that this tree, it's compared to a banyan tree, an upside down banyan tree, and that is described how the roots are actually going upwards, the branches are going down and in upwards in all different directions. So just like you see, close to a river, you will see the reflection of the tree which is upside down. So this material world is comparing to an upside down tree because it's a reflection of the spiritual world. And he says that you can actually cut this tree by the sword of knowledge. That knowledge, if you gain from the scriptures, from the sages, then you can actually cut this tree and then transcend and go beyond the three modes of material nature and back to the spiritual world. So he says, cut this tree with the axe of detachment. Ashanga shastrena dridena chitva. And then he says the surrendering process. So who can actually do something like that? So Krishna speaks this verse, nirmana moha jita sanga dosha. So he says, those who are free from false prestige, illusion and false association, who understand eternal, who are done with material lust, who are free from dualities of happiness and distress, who are unbewildered, know how to surrender unto the Supreme Person, attain to that eternal kingdom. So who can attain to that eternal kingdom? Those characteristics are described here. Who is free from illusion, prestige, false association, and so on. So these are some of the characteristics Krishna is describing here.
This detachment can be a mental detachment, not necessarily physical detachment.
Detachment is often characterized by the mental state only. For example, so when we talk about detachment, it's also not just mere detachment, it's attachment to the real thing also. So detachment, like we said, there is a negative axis, there is a 0, 0, and there is a positive axis. So yes, we detach ourselves from the material world, but then we need to get attached to the positive side also. Otherwise, that detachment will not last. Because what happens is when you are just detached from the material world, you go up to the 0, 0 level, but then there is no happiness there. So one might just fall down again to this material world. So when we speak of detachment, it's more in the sense of attachment to the real thing, which will automatically bring about material detachment. So which means, let's say we are using this laptop. I'm using this laptop now for this session. So someone who is a jnani, he will want to detach himself from this object, which is a laptop. He'll say, this is not meant for me. Or he'll not even touch money. They'll say, "Arey, this is not meant for a spiritualist." So no laptop, no gadgets, nothing.
Sir, I have a doubt.
Yeah.
In the previous sessions, you were discussing about the premature detachment and what is actual detachment. What is a matured kind of detachment, you say?
Yeah. So I'll just talk about what I was speaking about right now, which will also give you an understanding of how this principle can be applied. So the laptop is there, which I'm using currently, but this laptop, am I attached to it? No, because I'm not using it for my own sense enjoyment. I'm not using it for watching movies or some other things. So it's not for my own sake, but I'm using it for what? As service. So we are holding this session right now, we're discussing Bhagavad Gita. So which means, am I attached to it? Not really. I'm not using it for my own sake, but I'm using it in the service of the Lord. So that is real detachment in one sense, when you actually use things in this creation, in this world, for the service of the Lord. And when we talk about detachment, actually there is nothing like detachment in the real thing. Why? Is because when you say detachment, you are trying to say that, okay, I move away from this, it doesn't belong to me. The reality is, anyways, nothing belongs to us, because everything we're going to leave behind here. So that is actually false detachment. When you say that, I'm going to move away from this, or I'll not touch this. That is the jnani path. They try to detach themselves from everything in this world, in this creation. But the Vaishnavas, they actually use everything in the service of the Lord and not use it for their own enjoyment. So that is real detachment and attachment to the Supreme. So because everything that is there in this world can be used, but its proper use, it is to use in the service of the Lord. For example, someone may be good at singing. So the ability of singing can be very well used by actually singing and glorifying the Lord, doing kirtan. We saw different 9 processes of bhakti. So Shravanam, kirtan is one of the angas of bhakti yoga. So that same skill of singing can be used in the service of the Lord. So one doesn't have to detach and say that, okay, I'll stop singing now. It's not meant to be like that. Okay. So yes, detachment is on the mental platform more than the physical. That is also true in one sense. Okay. So next is on and on, over and over again. So this is the next section. Okay. So qualities of the spiritual world. So from material world to spiritual world by detachment and surrender. That is what Krishna is describing. And in this section, Krishna is also going to describe how he is maintaining everything, in this creation. And so like in this verse, he says, this is a very famous verse. It says, Natad bhashayate suryo, na shashanko na pavaka. Krishna is saying, I am the splendor of the light of the sun and the moon. And in fact, the sun and the moon are actually described to be the eyes of the Virata Rupa of the Lord. So imagine, if the sun was not there, our eyes, which we might be so much proud of that we are able to see with our eyes, if there was no sunlight, would we be able to see anything? When there is complete darkness, even though we may have our eyes, we are not able to see anything. Which means when the sun sees, or the light of the sun is there, the living entities can actually see. So Krishna is saying that I am that light of the sun and the moon. So a living entity, he will not be satisfied until he reaches the supreme abode, because it is his constitutional position to be related with Krishna. Okay, so there are 5 types of loving exchange. We have discussed this in the previous sessions, so we'll skip this a little bit now. Okay. Karma, we have discussed that also. Then Krishna says, Mame Vamsha Jiva Loka Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. Krishna says, who are the living entities? So that is being described here. The living entity is a part. Mame Va Amsha. Amsha means he is a part of the Supreme Lord. So every living entity is a part of the Supreme Lord. And he's struggling with his mind and senses here in the material world. Okay. So, okay, we'll skip this. Okay. Okay. So the maintenance, that is the next section, the maintainer of body, mind and soul. So Krishna is going to describe how, different things, there is cosmological arrangement, terrestrial arrangement, physiological arrangement, spiritual arrangement. All of these, arrangements are made by Krishna for the living entity in this material world. So that is what Krishna is going to describe now. Okay. So like he says, I am the source of the light. I enter into each planet, and because I'm entering into each planet, every planet is actually put in motion. I become the moon, and then because the moon is there, there is the juice that is there coming into the fruits, the vegetables that are growing. Without the moon, the vegetables will not actually have the juice in it, and without that, how will we even be able to eat anything if the juice wasn't there? So Krishna is saying that I am the moon. I'm putting the juice there. So I become the moon and thereby supply the juice of life to all vegetables, right? So then he says, I am the fire of digestion, which is there. So when we eat food, even that food, when it goes in the stomach, there is a fire that is there, in the stomach, which actually digests that food that we are eating. So Krishna is saying that I am that fire which is digesting it. And then he says, Sarvasya Chaham Hridhi Sannivishto Mata Smritir Jnanam Apohanam Cha. Krishna is saying, I am present in each and every living entity, Hridhi Sannivishto, in the region of the heart, as Paramatma. And from me comes remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. So even things when we remember, we have knowledge, or we are forgetful of things. Krishna is saying that I am giving that remembrance, knowledge, and forget. So even at the personal level, Krishna is maintaining us. I'm just going through a little fast because we are already 9:15. Then he says, by all the Vedas I am to be known. Vedesa sarver aham eva vedyo vedanta krit vedavit eva chaham. So Krishna is saying that for all the scriptures, the ultimate goal of all scriptures is to know me. That is the sum and substance of all scriptures. There are so many scriptures, there are so many Puranas, there are so many Upanishads. So Krishna is saying here in the Bhagavad Gita that of all the scriptures, the goal of all of it is to know who I am. Okay, and then who I am, that so he's saying I am the compiler of Vedanta. Krishna is saying I have actually compiled it. Okay, and the essence of it all, what is the essence that is described in the last 3 verses of this chapter. So just now we discussed how Krishna said that I am the ultimate goal, I am the compiler of Vedanta, and I'm the ultimate goal of what is given in the Vedic scriptures. So now Krishna is going to describe himself, who he is, and that is the essence in the 3 verses of the last 3 verses of this chapter. So Krishna says there are 2 kinds of living entities, Shara and Akshara, which means there are living entities who are conditioned and those who are liberated. And then he says that I am the super soul beyond Shara and Akshara. So having spoken about the object of worship of the yogis, Paramatma, Krishna now speaks about the object of worship of the devotees, or Bhagavan. Right? So what is the object of worship of the devotees that he's describing here? So he says Shara means fallible or fallible, and Akshara means infallible. So Krishna is saying I am transcendental beyond both the fallible and the infallible because I am the greatest. I am celebrated both in the world, in the Vedas, as a supreme person. Sometimes people think, there are certain transcendentalists who think that when I become liberated, I will become God or I will become infallible. Krishna is saying that there is fallible, there is infallible, there is a liberated living entity, there is a conditioned living entity. I am above them also. So Krishna is very clearly saying that I am above both of them. So which means that living entity can actually never become God, because Krishna is saying I am actually above both of them, above the fallible and the infallible living entities. So Krishna is establishing himself to be the supreme, above both the liberated living entities and those who are conditioned in this material world. Then he says, whoever knows me as a supreme personality of Godhead without doubting is the knower of everything. He therefore engages himself in full devotional service to me, O son of Bharat. This is the most confidential part of the Vedic scriptures, O sinless one. It is disclosed now by me. So Krishna is saying this is the most confidential part. So first he spoke about the Vedic scriptures, how the goal of Vedic scriptures is to know me, and now Krishna is saying that I am the topmost thing. I am the supreme personality of God, and one who knows is actually knowing everything. Whoever understands this will become wise, and his endeavors will know perfection. So that is how this chapter ends. There are many different descriptions of the spiritual world given, but I think we'll end here for today. If there are any questions or comments. Can we have the session tomorrow from 7 to 9? Okay, so you wish that things can go a little slower and therefore we have an extended session? Any other particular reason for it? Or is it because it's a weekend?
Yes, I think we are going very fast.
A little fast, okay. Yes. Yeah, we've already extended by 2 days or 3 days, and it's always very difficult to complete so much in such limited time. And we'll always feel short of time.
Sir, I
Yes.
have a question, sir. Sir, very few people remembers about their past lives. Why, sir? How could it be possible? Is it a boon or a curse?
In one sense, it's good, because imagine if you knew your past life and how you died. Let's say someone, put a knife through you, and if you actually remembered how you died in your previous life, or maybe you fell off a cliff or whatever. So in one sense it's good. So there is a natural forgetfulness for any living entity when there is a change of body. Even in this life, when our body is changing, we know that we forget things that happened in the past. So when there is complete change of body, then the forgetfulness is there. You will not remember the past lives, but it is seen that people somehow do remember past lives, but that's very rare, and that's by the mercy of the Lord, maybe, that they may be able to recollect their past lives. So, but it's not the natural thing. So in one sense, it's good that we don't remember, because there'll be so many past experiences of our past lives. But one thing that does happen is that whatever desires we have in our heart, those desires are carried forward into the next life, because the Paramatma is observing everything, and then, like Krishna says, I am the cause of remembrance also, which means in the next life, then whatever desires we had, Krishna will remind us all about it, and then we begin our activities like that. So therefore, you see, when there are some small children, they have certain propensities, even though they're very small. They're all different, and they have certain natures and propensities. Why? Because it's coming from the previous lives.
Is it possible to remember the past life through some processes?
I'm not sure if it's possible. There are things like past life, regressions and things like that, but I'm not very sure if it's mechanically possible to remember past lives like that. In one sense, it's not even needed, because the past is a past. What we need to worry about are present, to make our future. So, uh, even if let's say you came to know you were a king in the last life, it's hardly a matter of concern now, because we are living a different life right now, and uh, our activities now will actually determine our future. So the focus should be on the present more than the past. There might always be a curiosity what I was like and what I went through and so on, but the present is what we can try and focus on more.
Why the world is compared to a upside down banyan tree?
So yeah, I went a little fast. So in the first few verses, it's described. So uh, upside down banyan tree, because we said that it's a reflection of the spiritual world, and then the different branches, the twigs, the leaves, they're all also described. I did not go into the depths of it. Like it says in the verses 3 to 4, it says that uh, no one can understand where the tree is actually beginning, where it ends, where it starts, where its foundation is. But with determination, we should cut it with the weapon of detachment, and thereafter seek a place from where, having gone, one never returns. So this whole world is actually correct, described to be like an upside down tree, because it's not the real thing; it's a reflection. Whereas real thing is actually in the spiritual world. And then the different tree, the twigs and all of that are also described. The twigs are the objects of the senses. This tree has roots going down, and there are and these are bound to the fruitive actions of human society. There is a whole detailed description of the tree also given. The essence of it all is that it's describing the material world to be a perverted reflection of the original spiritual world. Any other questions?
How to get rid of karmas?
Okay, that's a good question. How do we get rid of karmas? By engaging in devotional service. So, devotional service is practically the only way by which we can not just get free of our karma or karmic reaction, because we have done so many sinful activities probably in the past, in the previous lives, and so on, because of which we suffer now. So, when we engage in devotional service, Krishna says in the later chapters, one who surrenders unto me and engages in service, I take away all the sinful reactions. Not just the reactions are taken away, in fact, even the desire or the propensity to commit that sin again is also taken away. And that is not possible in other processes. Whereas in the process of bhakti, even the desire to want to commit that sin, because what happens is, as soon as you commit a sin, there is a seed sown, which means that propensity will be born again for you to commit that same sin again. It will, over a period of time, fructify, and then we might end up again engaged in that sinful activity. So that propensity is also there. That is also a big problem. So it's sin is committed once, but it leads to further more sinning. So that propensity is also washed away by devotional service. So reactions is washed away, the propensity is washed away. So when we engage in bhakti, it takes care of everything in one sense. And the process of bhakti is we described before, Shavanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Pada Sevanam, which means hearing about the Lord. Maybe reading Bhagavad Gita, even that's devotional service. Just to read Bhagavad Gita is devotional service. Hear Bhagavad Gita is devotional service. We did chanting of Hare Krishna Mahamantra at the beginning of the session. That is devotional service. So, when we engage in these practical processes, we're actually cutting down of our sinful reactions in one way. It will purify us. See, this world is all created for a reason. When the living entity, let's say there is a thief and he is put in the jail. Why is he put in the jail?
Because he had committed a crime.
And therefore what? Why the jail?
Punishment for it.
Punishment and
And to improve himself.
improve
for
himself, which means to reform him. Which means he committed something and we need to reform him. Therefore, probably he is put in the jail for a certain amount of years. So, if the thief is reformed even before the period, which he's supposed to be there in the jail for, so he can be let free, right? Because he's reformed. Similarly, the living entity, when he starts engaging in devotional service, then the influence of the three modes of material nature, the goodness, passion, ignorance, gets loosened. It's weakened. Why? Because the living entity is now doing what he is supposed to originally do. He is realigning himself in service of the Lord, and therefore the influence of the modes will reduce, and he will now get actually connected to the Supreme Lord, and therefore he doesn't have to suffer in the material world anymore. So the reactions, even though he had to suffer maybe some sinful reactions or whatever, it's not needed anymore now. Why? Because he is reformed. He started engaging in devotional service. So that is how the sinful reactions will not anymore affect, or even if it affects, it will only help him further go up and up on this path. So Krishna takes control and charge of the devotees.
So that means if we are facing any hurdles for doing the bhakti of God, then is it something like that are due to our karmas or maybe for some other reason? That what is it?
Hurdles in doing bhakti, you are saying, or hurdles in general life?
In bhakti, and for example, like last week I thought of, I had determined that I will attend all the sessions, but somehow I missed one session. Of course, I heard the recordings, but the recordings and the live session makes a lot of difference. So I could sense that. And next day onwards, like I could really made up my mind and I could attend all the sessions after that. But that one day was like a biggest hurdle for me. So many things came up and I just couldn't do it. So
it may happen, but that is how the material world is. It will never be stable. So the important point was your disposition, your attitude towards it, which was that you did not, just because you missed it, you did not miss the recording. So that is what Krishna is seeing.
Sure. All right. Thank you. Understood.
Yeah.
Sir, do our bad karmas, good karmas neutralize the bad karmas, or
No, they are separate bank accounts. It's not that doing good karma will neutralize bad karma. Bad karma is there, you have to suffer for that. Good karma is there, you have to enjoy that. One does not, affect the
you
other.
cannot compensate for a bad
It
karma?
doesn't compensate, no.
And that bad karma's account can be reduced by devotional service.
Yeah, so all reactions of our past karma, they will all be made to zero, or not made to zero but reduced when we start performing devotional service. And even if there is some reaction that comes, then that will only help us further go on high up in the path of devotional service.
Sir,
Yeah.
behind any work, how much effort, how much luck, and how much God contributes? Which one plays a vital role among these three?
So whenever we are engaged in any activity, the living entity has a free will, which means he can choose what he wants to do and what he doesn't want to do. What we undergo or what we experience, that may be because of our past lives, but what we do in that situation is our choice. It's our free will. So it's not luck. We cannot say that although I chose this, but then it was luck. No, it's not like that. So at every juncture, we have a free will to choose what we want to do and what we don't want to do, and that will create further reaction. So whatever we suffer and enjoy in this material right now is from our past karma, and what we choose to do in that situation is our free will. So we'll always have a choice, and we'll be responsible for whatever we choose.
But the destiny sometimes is also because of our karmas.
Yes, destiny is because of our karmas, and at the same time, when we engage in devotional service, the destiny will change, can change, because devotional service, as we said, it neutralizes the reactions. That's the only way it can actually change.
There's one quick point. Sorry, I'm interrupting.
Yes, Prabhuji.
When you clap in kirtan, the lines in the hand change.
So I didn't get.
Prabhuji said that when we clap in kirtan, the lines in the hand change, which means you may have a certain destiny, but when you're actually using your hands to clap in kirtan, then your destiny is actually changing. The lines will change. In other words, devotional service, when you're engaged in, you will, it's actually changing your destiny.
So effort is also very important to accomplish the task.
Certainly, effort is important. So when I said free will, so the free will require whatever that path you choose to enact. There is effort needed there, and at the same time, effort is not everything. Just because we may put a lot of effort doesn't mean we'll get the result. So there are 5 factors which we'll see in the later chapters of how an act comes into being. So even the super soul, like they say, not a blade of grass is moved without the will of the Lord. So the sanction of the super soul should also be there. Any other questions? It's already past 9:30, so we'll probably stop here. I know we've been going a little fast. Bhagavad Gita is 700 verses, and we are just summarizing the chapters. But you need not worry, because we are having a weekly session on every Saturday in which we go verse by verse, which means one verse at a time, maybe 2-3 verses in a session. So we'll be sharing details of that with all of you about that session that happens every Saturday in the morning, and you all can be a part of it also. So once this course gets over, then every Saturday you can join for the detailed study of the Bhagavad Gita.
Would be very useful. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. Good night.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, sir.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.